$1 billion deal nearly died in the back seat of a taxi. Not in some boardroom, not through a failed wire transfer or a rival's midnight filing. In the worn vinyl back seat of a yellow cab driven by a man named Earl on a Tuesday in November, in rain so steady it had been falling since morning and showed no sign of stopping. Earl Briggs did not know any of that. He did not know what the slim silver laptop in his back seat was worth, or what it contained, or whose entire future hung inside it. He only knew it was not his. And that was enough. If you have ever trusted someone when you had no reason to, if you have ever watched a good person get overlooked when they deserve to be seen, stay close. This story is for you. Earl Briggs was 51 years old and had driven a cab in this city for 11 years. Before that, he had worked the floor of an auto parts warehouse outside of Memphis for 9 years, lifting boxes until his lower back gave him a warning he should have heeded sooner. He had a daughter named Kezia, who was 17 and wanted to study architecture. He had a studio apartment on the 3rd floor of a building on Macon Street where the radiator clicked like a metronome all winter, and the window in the bathroom no longer closed, flush against the frame. He drove the overnight shift when he could get it because the overnight paid a small premium and every dollar counted. On the evenings he worked days, he ate dinner before leaving so Kezia could have what was left in the pot without rationing it. He told her he had already eaten at work. She was 17 and believed him some of the time. He was not a man who talked about himself. He was not a man who complained. He was the kind of man who handed a paper napkin to the passenger who was crying in the back seat, and then said nothing further about it, giving her the quiet dignity of her grief without making her explain it. He was the kind of man who had once stopped the cab at 2 a.m. because an elderly woman was standing outside a convenience store in the rain, and the bus had stopped running. He had driven her the 8 blocks to her building, and when she tried to press a $5 bill through the partition he had waved it off and told her to get inside out of the wet. His dispatcher had heard about that one and docked him the lost fare time. Earl had nodded and said nothing. The city did not notice men like Earl. It did not mean to overlook them. It simply moved too fast and looked too high up to see them. On the Tuesday in November, Earl picked up a fare at the Meridian Hotel at 7:38 in the morning. He knew the time because the receipt printer logged it, and he checked the log that evening after everything had already happened. The fare was a man in a charcoal suit, mid-40s by the look of him, with a phone pressed to his ear before the cab door was even shut. He gave an address downtown, the sort of address that meant a tower of glass and someone on the 40th floor who would not be kept waiting. He talked on the phone for the full 12 minutes of the ride, and he did not look up once. When the cab stopped at the curb, he was already reaching for the door. He tapped the screen on the partition to pay without removing the phone from his ear, and he stepped out into the rain with his briefcase and his umbrella, and the cab door swung shut behind him. He had left the laptop on the seat. A slim silver machine, barely thicker than a hardback book. Earl found it when he pulled away from the curb and checked the back seat the way he always did between fares. He pulled to the side of the block and picked it up. It was not in a case. No bag, no sleeve, just the machine itself, and taped to the underside of it with a strip of clear packing tape was a business card. Earl peeled it off carefully. The card read, Marcus Hale, Senior Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions, Vantage Capital Group. There was a direct line printed underneath and a cell number written in pen along the bottom margin. Earl sat with the laptop in his lap and the rain coming down on the windshield, and he thought about it for maybe 15 seconds. His shift still had 4 hours left. He had Kezia's winter coat on his mind, the one she had outgrown in September and had not yet replaced because the one he could afford at the discount store had a broken zipper she said she could live with. His own shoes were leaking at the left toe. There was a $14 shortfall in his account that was going to become a $22 shortfall in 2 days when the water bill auto-drafted. He turned the business card over in his hand. A person could talk themselves into almost anything if they wanted to. He understood that. He understood that the man had left the laptop willingly in the sense that he had been careless, and carelessness at that level of wealth felt like a different category of problem from the kind of carelessness Earl lived with, where a forgotten bill could mean a dark apartment and a daughter eating cereal for dinner. He understood all of that, and he sat with it the way a man sits with something he is not actually going to do, but owes the consideration of thinking about anyway. The card in his hand had a cell number written in pen along the margin. That was what someone wrote when they wanted a call at any hour, not during business hours only. Whatever was on that laptop mattered to the man who left it. Earl did not know how much it mattered. He only knew it was not his. He called the cell number. He did not know what he expected. He did not expect much. He thought there was a fair chance the man on the other end would be annoyed or distracted or would treat the call like a transaction he needed to complete as quickly as possible. What he got instead was silence. 3 full seconds of silence on the other end of the line after he said, "I think you left your laptop in my cab." What Earl could not know was what was inside that laptop. He could not know that the man in the charcoal suit had spent the previous 48 hours constructing a merger proposal that his firm had been working toward for 14 months. He could not know that the document was cloud-saved, but that the encryption layer the firm's IT department had installed made it accessible only from a trusted device, and that the meeting with the other party's principals was in 4 hours and 40 minutes. He could not know that Vantage Capital's general counsel had been on the phone with Marcus 6 minutes earlier, asking him to confirm he had everything he needed, and that Marcus had said yes. He could not know any of that. He only knew the man on the phone had gone very quiet. "You have it," the man said. It was not a question. "I have it," Earl said. "It was on the back seat after you got out." Another silence. Then the man said, "Where are you right now?" Earl told him. He was 3 blocks from where he had let the man off. Marcus said he would be there in 4 minutes, and Earl said he would wait. He did wait. He sat in the cab with the laptop on the passenger seat, and he waited. And when the man appeared at the window, running in the rain without the umbrella, his charcoal suit dark with it across the shoulders, Earl rolled down the glass and passed the laptop through without ceremony. Marcus stood on the sidewalk with the laptop held against his chest like something he had pulled from a fire. He looked at Earl through the open window and he started to say something, and then stopped. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and produced a fold of bills. "I don't take money for something like this," Earl said. "Please," Marcus said. "No," Earl said. "You had a hard morning. Go do what you have to do." He rolled the window up and pulled back into traffic. He didn't look in his rearview mirror to see if the man was still standing there. He picked up his next fare at the corner 2 blocks north, and he drove the rest of his shift the way he always drove it, steady and unhurried, through the rain. He ate a vending machine sandwich at 2 in the afternoon because he had not packed a lunch. He thought about Kezia and the coat with the broken zipper, and he thought about the water bill, and then he stopped thinking about those things because there was nothing to be done about them at the moment, and he had learned a long time ago that worry did not pay. He went home at 4, heated up the leftover rice and red beans from the night before, and did not tell Kezia about the laptop or the man in the charcoal suit or any of it. Marcus Hale made his meeting. He walked into the conference room on the 40th floor with 11 minutes to spare, which was, as his colleague Dana would tell him afterward, about 11 minutes more than she had expected when she saw his face in the lobby. He had ridden the elevator up with his jacket still damp at the shoulders and his hair not entirely dry, and she had handed him a towel from the credenza in the meeting prep room and told him he had 4 minutes to look like he had not just run 3 blocks in November rain. He made use of the 4 minutes. The laptop was open and running before the other party's team was fully seated. The document was there, all 112 pages of it, the tables and the projections and the terms they had negotiated down to language, and Marcus had walked through the first section with the steadiness of someone who had not spent the previous 20 minutes convinced it was sitting in the back of a taxi forever. The merger proposal went as they had prepared it. There was a point in the early afternoon when the other party's lead attorney pushed back on a specific exclusion clause, and Marcus navigated it the way he had navigated everything that day, from the outside calm. The counteroffer that came back before close of business was the kind of counteroffer that meant the deal was going to happen. 14 months of work, a transaction valued when it ultimately closed at $1.3 billion, and it had nearly been left in the rain. It had been carried back to him by a man who had not known any of that, a man who had not asked what was on the laptop or what it was worth, a man who had simply understood that it was not his. Marcus did not forget that. Some men would have. Some men, once the pressure lifted and the win was on the board, would have tucked the memory of the taxi ride into the category of things they had overcome and moved on without further thought. Marcus was not built that way, and part of the reason he was not built that way was a woman named Cora, who had raised him in a 2-bedroom apartment in this same city 30 years before, working a double shift at a hospital to do it, and who had told him often enough that he finally believed it. The people who show up for you when there is nothing in it for them are the ones you carry forward. He called the cab company the next morning. He had the receipt. He had the timestamp. He asked the dispatcher if they could connect him with the driver from that fare, and the dispatcher, who was not in the habit of giving out driver information to strangers on the phone, told him he would need to speak with the company's customer service line. Marcus did. Customer service told him they would pass along his contact information to the driver, and the driver could choose whether to call back. Earl received the message from dispatch on Thursday morning. He read it twice. He called the number, and a woman who introduced herself as an assistant at Vantage Capital told him that Mr. Hale would like to meet with him at his convenience, and would he prefer the office or somewhere else. Earl thought a corporate office was a strange place for a conversation he could not quite picture, so he said somewhere else, and the assistant suggested a restaurant. Earl named the diner 2 blocks from his building because it was the place he was comfortable, and he did not feel like pretending to be comfortable somewhere he was not. They met on Saturday morning. Earl was there first, in a booth by the window. He had on his good shirt, the one with the small collar and the dark blue check, the one he wore to Kezia's school events. He had a coffee in front of him, and he was looking at the rain, which had come back for the weekend, as if it had never left. Marcus arrived at 5 minutes past the hour, in civilian clothes, a dark pullover and slacks, and he slid into the seat across from Earl and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said. "Sure," Earl said. They talked. It took a while to get going, the way conversations do between 2 people who do not have a shared vocabulary yet, but it got going. The waitress came, and Marcus ordered coffee and a short stack, and Earl thought that was a reasonable thing to order on a Saturday morning, and he asked for the same. Marcus asked Earl how long he had been driving, and Earl told him, 11 years in this city. Marcus asked what he had done before that, and Earl told him that too. He told him about the warehouse and the bad back in Memphis, and about the physical therapist who had told him to stop lifting, and the cousin who had connected him with the cab company when he came north looking for a change. Marcus listened the way people listen when they are actually listening, without the impatience that is usually there, even when it is being concealed. The small signal of a mind preparing its next point, rather than taking in what is being said. Earl was a man who had spent 11 years reading passengers in the few seconds after they got into his cab, and he could tell the difference. Earl did not offer the detail about Kezia, or the coat, or the water bill. He talked about his work the way he talked about it to anyone who asked, which was to say he talked about it as work, not as hardship, because he did not think of it as hardship. It was what he did. It was the shape of his life, and he had made his peace with it honestly, without bitterness, and that peace was apparent in the way he talked about it. "I want to do something for you," Marcus said. "I want you to understand what you gave me back." Earl shook his head. "I gave you back your laptop." "You gave me back a year's work," Marcus said. "Maybe more than that." "Still a laptop," Earl said. He was not being difficult. He meant it. In his accounting, a thing left in a cab belonged to the person who left it, and returning it was what you did, and that was the end of the arithmetic. He did not consider himself owed. He did not consider himself generous in any special way. He had simply done the thing that needed doing. Marcus studied him across the table. He had met a lot of people in his career. He had sat across from men who drove hard bargains over hundreds of millions of dollars and made it feel like a favor. He had listened to people describe what they deserved in voices that left no room for disagreement. He had learned to read a room full of executives the way other people read a menu, quickly and with an eye for what was worth ordering. What he was not used to was sitting across from a man who genuinely did not believe he was owed anything. Not as performance, not as negotiation, as a plain fact about the world. He looked at Earl for a long moment, and he made a decision. "Tell me about your daughter," he said. Earl went still. "I didn't mention a daughter." "You have a cab air freshener shaped like a number 17, Marcus said. "It's a jersey number, and you have a graduation year written on a piece of tape on your dashboard 2 years from now. I noticed when I was outside the window." Earl looked at him. He had underestimated the man. "She wants to study architecture." "Okay," Marcus said. "Tell me about that." Earl told him. He told him about Kezia's notebooks, the ones she filled with sketched building plans she made up on her own, the ones she showed him on Sunday mornings when they had breakfast together. He told him about the school presentation she had given last spring on adaptive housing for seniors, the one her teacher had submitted to a state design competition without telling her, and she had come home holding a yellow participation ribbon like it was something she intended to frame. He told Marcus that she was the kind of person who worked the way Earl worked, not asking for notice and not expecting it, just doing the thing until it was done. He had not meant to say all of that. He did not know why he had. Marcus did not say anything for a moment. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. Then he described the foundation. Vantage Capital funded scholarships for students in design and architecture, full tuition and a housing stipend at any of 8 partner universities. He set the cup down. "I would like your daughter to apply," he said. Earl looked at him. "It's a competitive process," Marcus said. "She would need to submit a portfolio and an essay. It's not a guarantee, but I want her to apply, and I will make sure her application is reviewed by the people who need to see it." "Why?" Earl said. "Because you handed me back something worth more than you knew," Marcus said. "And you asked for nothing. That is not a small thing. I'm not going to pretend it is." Earl sat with that for a long time. Outside the diner window, the rain ran down the glass in long, slow lines. The coffee had gone lukewarm. A bus moved through the water at the curb and threw a low wave across the gutter. "She earns it on her own," Earl said at last, "or it doesn't mean anything." "I know that," Marcus said. "I wouldn't have it any other way." There are moments that change the course of a life that look nothing like the movies. They do not arrive with swelling music or a crowd of witnesses. They arrive in a diner booth at 9 in the morning, in the rain, between 2 men who did not know each other's names a week ago. Earl drove home after that breakfast, and he sat in the parking lot behind his building for a few minutes before going up. He thought about his mother, who had died when he was 34 and who had believed in him in the specific, quiet way that mothers who work hard believe in their children, without ceremony, without condition. He thought she would have found this funny in the good way that life sometimes becomes funny when it folds back on itself. He went upstairs and he told Kezia. She was at the kitchen table with one of her notebooks, a mechanical pencil behind her ear. She listened with the pencil still in her hair and her hands flat on the table, and when he finished talking she said, "Dad, are you serious?" "I am serious," Earl said. She looked at him. Then she looked at the notebook. Then she looked at him again and she said, "I need to see what they want in the portfolio." That was all she said. She pulled the laptop toward her and started looking it up. Earl stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her, and the feeling that moved through him was not pride exactly, though it was close to pride. It was more like recognition. He had known his whole life that she was the more important part of the two of them, the part that was going somewhere, and now the world was going to get a chance to find that out. Kezia applied in January. She started working on the portfolio in December, 2 weeks before the deadline, though she had in some sense been working on it for 3 years. She spread her notebooks across the kitchen table on evenings when Earl was on his shift, and she photographed the hand-drawn plans under the lamp, the ones she had been making since she was 14, the ones that started as copies of buildings she had looked up online and evolved into something that was entirely her own thinking. The adaptive housing project was in there, the full 40-page document she had produced for the school competition, and she added 3 concept drawings she made specifically for the application. Buildings she had never drawn before, working in pencil at the kitchen table in the hour before midnight when the building was quiet. Earl saw some of this. He came home from his shift to find her still at the table with the notebooks spread around her, and he made her a plate from whatever was in the refrigerator and set it beside the notebooks without comment, and went to bed. She ate at the table while she worked. She was his daughter in every particular of her approach to a thing she cared about. She submitted the portfolio on a Sunday afternoon and wrote the essay in one sitting and did not let Earl read it until after she had already sent it in. He read it that evening, alone at the kitchen table after she had gone to her room. The essay was about the apartment on Macon Street, about the window that did not close flush, and the radiator that clicked and the way the light came in through the east window in the morning across the kitchen table where they ate breakfast together, about what it had meant to her, growing up in a small space with a man who filled it with steadiness and warmth, about what she wanted to build and why, which was the same thing in her mind. She wanted to build spaces that held people well, that gave people what they needed, that did not overlook them. Earl sat at the table for a long time after he finished reading it. He folded the paper and set it down, and he went to the window and looked out at Macon Street and the wet pavement below. The radiator clicked behind him. He did not cry. He came close. Kezia was admitted to the program in March. The letter arrived by email on a Thursday evening, forwarded to Earl because she had listed him as her emergency contact, and the system had CC'd him automatically. He saw it on his phone while he was waiting at a red light, and he pulled over to read it. He sat in the cab at the curb with his flashes on and read it 3 times. He called her from the curb. "Kez," he said when she picked up. "Check your email." He heard her go quiet. He heard the click of a keyboard. He heard her breathing change. "Dad," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Dad," she said again, and her voice did what his would not, and he listened to her with his forehead resting against the steering wheel while the rain fell on the roof of the cab and the flashes ticked in the dark. She was in. Marcus's office received the notification the same evening, as all accepted applicants were flagged to the program coordinator. His assistant brought it to him the next morning with his messages. He read it and was still for a moment. Then he put it with the other papers on his desk and returned to the work in front of him. He told no one about it. There was nothing to tell in his view. The foundation had evaluated the portfolio and the essay and made its decision on the merits as it always did. He had ensured the application was seen. What the selection committee did with it was its own business. The outcome meant that his role in it had been what he intended. A door opened, not a result guaranteed. What he did do was send Earl a message through the cab company's system because he had not exchanged numbers with him at the diner, and he did not know another way to reach him. The message said, "I heard she deserved it." Earl received it on a Sunday and read it in the parking lot before his shift. He read it twice. He sat with it the way he sat with most things, quietly, turning it over without making more of it than it was. He thought about writing something back. He did not know what he would say that would be accurate without overstating, and he did not like to overstate, so he said nothing. He filed the message in his mind the way he filed important papers in the accordion folder, not to be discarded, not to be dramatized. Then he went to work. If you're still with me now, think about this. Think about what it takes to sit in a cab in the rain with someone else's property and choose to call. No audience, no incentive, no guarantee of a thank you. Just a simple understanding of what belongs to whom and what the right thing is. Earl did not do what he did because he expected it to go anywhere. He did it because it was the only thing he knew how to do. That is not a small kind of character. It is, in fact, the rarest kind. Kezia started at the university the following September. She was 17 credit hours into her first semester when she called Earl on a Sunday evening with the particular quality of excitement in her voice that she had had since she was 9, the brightness that meant she had learned something she needed to share immediately. She had been assigned a studio project, her first real design problem, a hypothetical community centre for an underserved neighbourhood, and she had spent 2 days walking the site they had been given. A corner lot in a part of the city that looked, she said, a lot like Macon Street. "I keep thinking about how the light works in our kitchen," she told him. "How the morning light is the best thing in that apartment. How it changes the whole room. I want to figure out how to do that in a building. How to give that to people." Earl drove slowly down Hennessy Avenue while she talked, the cab warm and the rain coming down outside the way it so often did in this city in October. He caught a green light at the cross street and rolled through without accelerating, keeping the pace slow so he could hear her. There was a fare light on 2 blocks up, and he could see the person waiting at the curb under a black umbrella, and he decided he would circle back for them in a few minutes. He did not say much. He did not need to. She was not asking him to understand the architectural theory behind what she was describing, the way natural light moved through a deep plan floor plate, the relationship between the depth of a window reveal and the quality of the illumination on the far wall. She would not have expected him to follow all of that, and she would not have wanted to slow down to explain it. She was thinking out loud, in the way she had been doing since she was 12, using him as the steady presence against which she tested her ideas, knowing that what she needed from him was not technical response, but attention. He had learned that long ago. He gave her the attention. It was the thing he had always been best at, the thing he had given her as steadily as anything else in her life, through the years in the small apartment, and the years of the bad back, and the years of the overnight shift, and every other shape the difficulty had taken. "You'll figure it out," he said, when she had come to a natural stop. "You always say that," she said. "It's always been true," he said. She laughed. It was the light version of her laugh, the one with the air in it, the one that he had learned to tell apart from the deeper version years ago. He drove another block before she said goodnight and rang off, and then he was alone in the cab with the rain and the radio and the city moving past the windows and the familiar quiet of the work he knew how to do. 3 things changed for Earl that year that he did not expect. The first was that his dispatcher, without explanation, moved him permanently to the day shift and gave him first pick of airport fares, which were the longest and the most consistent. The airport runs paid better and wore on his back less than the short downtown fares, and over the course of a month the difference was real. He did not ask why, and the dispatcher did not say. The dispatcher had received a phone call from the fleet manager, who had received a phone call from someone Earl would never meet. He suspected and did not investigate the suspicion because he had learned that some gifts you receive more gracefully by not demanding to know how they arrived. The second was a letter from the building management on Macon Street in November, informing him that a 3-year lease renewal had been filed in his name for the apartment with a rent figure that was 15% below current market. The letter said the adjustment had been made at the owner's direction and was not subject to review. Earl did not know who owned the building. He had never known who owned the building. He had lived in it for 6 years and given no thought to the chain of ownership above the management company because the management company was who he wrote the check to, and that had always been enough. He read the letter 3 times, carefully, looking for the catch in it. There was no catch. He filed it with his other important papers in the accordion folder he kept on the shelf above the refrigerator, next to the lease itself and Kezia's birth certificate, and his own car registration and the small folder where he kept the documentation on the loan he had paid off the previous spring. The third thing was the radiator. It was replaced in December. A maintenance crew came one Saturday while Earl was at work, and when he came home the clicking was gone, and the apartment was the warmest it had been in 3 winters. He stood in the middle of the room and listened to the silence where the clicking had been. It was not a sound he had minded, particularly. It had been part of the rhythm of the apartment, the way his own breathing was part of the rhythm of the apartment, present and not registered. Its absence was like the absence of something he had not known he was carrying. He stood in the warm quiet for a moment. Then he understood, in the way you understand something when the evidence has been accumulating for a while, that Marcus had more reach than a single scholarship foundation. He did not call to say thank you. He did not know how to reach Marcus, and he was not sure it was his place. What he did instead was the thing he had always done. He went on doing his work, and he did it well, and he gave his daughter what she needed, and he did not make himself smaller than he was, and he did not ask for more than came to him honestly. Kindness moves in the world the way water moves in the ground. You cannot always see where it is going. You cannot always see what it is feeding. It does not announce itself. It does not keep a ledger, or if it does, it keeps one that only reveals itself across years, in radiators replaced and rents adjusted, and letters from universities and daughters on Sunday evenings with brightness in their voices. Earl was not a man the city noticed. He was not a man who expected to be noticed. He drove his cab and he raised his daughter and he handed back what was not his because that was the kind of man he was. And he did not attach a price to that because he had never understood kindness as a transaction. He picked up 1,000 fares in the years that followed. He didn't think much about Marcus. He thought about Kezia and about the money he was slowly setting aside now that the rent had eased, and about whether the academy that had reached out to him about teaching a defensive driving class on Saturday mornings was something he wanted to do. He thought about his mother, and whether she would have liked Kezia, which she would have deeply and immediately. He thought about the radiator and the quiet that came with it. Kezia came home for winter break in her sophomore year with a presentation she had made in her studio class. It was a 24-slide deck on her approach to a public library renovation, with hand-drawn details for the lighting plan that showed, in careful elevation drawings, how natural light could move through a deep plan floor plate in the morning hours to reach the reading rooms at the building's core. Her professor had called it the strongest student presentation the department had seen in 3 years. There was a note from the dean attached to the feedback slip. She showed it to Earl at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning. She walked him through each slide with the same patience he had given her, the patience of someone who understands that explanation is a form of love. He looked at the drawings carefully. He didn't understand all of them. He understood enough. When she got to the slide about the light, he recognized the kitchen window and the proportions. He did not say so. He did not need to. "This is good work," he said. She looked at him the way she had always looked at him when he said something true without dressing it up. "Thank you, Dad." They had breakfast together, The light came in through the east window the way it always had, long and warm across the table, and Earl poured the coffee and Kezia talked about next semester, about a summer internship application she was preparing, about a professor who had offered to write her a recommendation. She talked about a classmate named Jada who had started a small design collective with 2 other students and had asked Kezia if she wanted to join, and she was thinking about it. She talked about the city she was going to be working in if she got the internship, a city she had never been to, and about whether the architecture there was going to feel different from what she knew. Earl listened and drank his coffee. The morning moved at the pace. Mornings move when there is no urgency in them. The radiator was quiet. The window on the bathroom was still not quite flush against the frame, and one of these days he was going to get around to it, maybe in the spring when the light was better for that kind of work. The water bill was current. The accordion folder on the shelf held its papers in order, the lease renewal on top. Outside on Macon Street, the morning traffic moved in the direction of the rest of the day. It was enough. It was more than enough. For a man who had asked for nothing, the world had turned out to be generous beyond his counting. He sipped his coffee. Across the table, his daughter drew a small elevation sketch on the margin of a napkin, working something out in her mind, her pencil moving the way it always moved, with the confidence of someone who had learned early that she had something worth building. He didn't interrupt her. He had never interrupted her in his life, not when she was working, not when she was drawing, not when she was thinking something through at that kitchen table with a pencil in her hand, and her mind somewhere he could not follow. It was the smallest form of respect he knew how to give, and he had been giving it since she was old enough to have thoughts worth protecting. He never had. If you have ever done the right thing when no one was watching, if you have ever passed something back across a threshold you could have kept it on, leave a word below. Some stories deserve to be heard. This story is told in the spirit of the many quiet men and women whose decency moves through the world without announcement. Any resemblance to real persons or events is coincidental.